Hello and welcome. We're going to be doing enemy action Ardennes. Okay, so I do have another playthrough of this. It is the first one that I did, and I confess I had never played the game before. And so I put a part 0 video there, briefly explaining that I had never played before. And I found the video to be helpful for many people because they get to learn the game along with me, and it was very interactive. Like, people would watch my video and then give me feedback afterwards. And so we kept promising video after video after video that if I finally started to get the rules right, that I would start this playthrough that you're going to see right now. And it's really funny because I made it through 28 videos before we reached that point. And even then I was still getting stuff wrong, but the stuff I was getting wrong was more boneheaded stuff than, just flat out misunderstanding the rules. Although I think there still was one thing I had learned on that day. But anyways, we are at a point where I think I can adequately teach this game, not as an expert, mind you, but as a person who has played it and understands it. Now, I play a lot of DVG games. I think you've seen me cover a lot of DVG games. This is much more complicated than that, but that doesn't mean that I can't handle it per se. But it's definitely, you can't just breeze through it like you can a DVG game. This game has a lot of rules. And then for every rule, there's a counter rule. And that's where I get hung up when I was learning the game. And I'm going to do my best to try to help you to not get hung up on the same things I did. And it's really funny because the things that I struggled, I remember on video 18 still getting some key things very, very wrong. And what's interesting is now I remember them. Because once it finally dawned on me, it was like, oh my gosh, and so I'm going to try to help show you those oh my gosh moments. And hopefully not, because of the length of this game, I can sometimes just get brain fatigue, and then I make mistakes, like just mental mistakes. So I'm going to try to avoid that. But anyways, let's jump in and talk about setup. There's 3 games that come with Enemy Action Ardennes. There's a 2-player game, which is I have the map underneath all of that junk over there. I'm blessed with a table where I can put all 3 maps on it underneath plexiglass. So I know not everybody gets that luxury, but I have the 2-player map over there. So if I ever want to play the 2-player game, I can. I have the German solo map right in front of me, and then that's the Allied solo map over to the left. We are going to do the German solo map, and I've already committed that we're going to do an Allied solo map as well, but one at a time. This by itself is quite a monster. So I fully expect quite a lot of videos, 20 hours or more of videos to cover this. And so strap your seatbelts and enjoy the ride. Special credit to heavy lifting by myself. I think I got his YouTube channel correct. He does a playthrough of this, and he inspired me, first of all, and he does a much better job of video editing than I ever will. I don't do any video editing, in case you haven't figured that out. I hit record and I go nonstop until I hit stop, and then I upload whatever happened. And so my YouTube channel is a little different than other people. I'm not here to give you a finely manufactured product. I'm here to have you join me at the table. And that's what this is. You're going to join me at the table, and we're going to play a game together. And so you're going to get to hear me shuffle through the rulebook. You're going to get to hear me suppress myself from swearing. You're going to get to do all those things with me. You're going to hear my kids running around the house. You're going to hear my doorbell ring. I do shut the video off when that happens. But anyways, you're here. You're at my home, and you're playing a game with me. That's what this is all about. And so what I'm going to hope to do is impart whatever wisdom I can, and let's do a playthrough together of this game. Okay, so first things first. When you're playing the German solo game, there's some key things that you use and don't use, okay? So all the components, you're gonna punch your components and just sort them by type. It's pretty easy to know what the types are. These here are just special markers for helping you to identify reserve placements. I tend not to use them, but I probably should, and you're gonna see why later. These here that look like little driver's wheel symbols, those are out of the game. They're only used in the Allied solo game, so you can just set these out of the game. These are used heavily in this game. I probably use those tokens more than anything. These, we will probably eventually use them. They represent isolated units, which are a progression from when units are low in supply, then they go out of supply, and then they're eventually isolated. These are disruption markers, and we definitely use those in this game. These are out of fuel markers. We will be using those. That is the low supply markers, and they look like ammunition. That just means low supply. And then in the next one over, you could see it has the line through it. That means out of supply. And then way up there is just that's just a nice way of marking, if you own a city or if the Allies own a city, because if you move your troops outside of a city, you still maintain possession of it, even if you don't have a troop there. And that's what those help denote. Now, obviously, if you control a city and an Allied player were to walk into that city, they take it automatically. But that's the point, is until they do, it is yours for fuel and other purposes. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of things that it benefits you. Okay, so there's still more markers. There are these exit markers, which we won't be using yet, but they are used in the game. And there's these bridge markers. Now, these are used to denote who controls a bridge. And what I've found is that these bridges are really hard to see in the game. And let me show you real quick. So see this little thing that's on this hex. So this is one hex here, and this is another hex. And see this hex side where the river is? There's a little bridge there. Let me zoom in. You can see there's a bridge here, and there's another bridge there, and there's yet another one here. Now, those bridges have a lot of logic around them. There are rules around when you enter a hex next to a bridge, when you're crossing a bridge, you name it. There's quite a few rules. And because they're so hard to see, I sometimes don't notice it. And you can see here, like, the units, the chips, when they're, so when I have a chip on that spot, see how it covers up most of the bridge? It's real easy to forget that there's a bridge there. So what I did was I put these here to remind me that there's a bridge there. And that is not necessarily part of the rules. That's just something I do and I recommend. I saw this guy, I think it was the Heavy Lifting YouTube channel. He was using cubes, and I thought that was a brilliant idea. I just don't feel like getting out my cubes. This seems to work just fine. Okay, so the next thing is, well, there still are more markers. There's these fuel markers, 5 of them. Just turn them over, randomize them, and we'll get back to those in a second. Just set them off to the side. And then there's these are like, this is a bridge destroyed marker, and this is a roadblock marker. So just set those aside. And then when you talk about your various units, some of the units are going to have, see that little R there? That means it's a replacement, or is it just put them aside. I think it stands for replacement, but just put them over here and away from everything else out of the game, and you'll be gold. And you can see that there's not a whole lot of them, but I can explain to you real quick what it is every unit has, see these little dots here on the left? Those are called steps. You'll hear me often call them pips. But so this is a 2-step unit. When it takes damage, it would flip over, and then it's a 1-step unit, and then if it takes damage, it's destroyed. So 2 steps is how many times it can take damage before it's destroyed, okay? Some units are 4 pips or 4 steps, like this one. So this one here, you can see has 4 pips on it, and so if it takes damage, it's 3 pips. Well, if that takes damage, then we have to get 2 pips. Well, there's only 2 sides, and so that's what this is. You come over here, and you can see the reinforcement, or the replacement, if you will, is this guy with 2 pips. And sorry for the focus issues here. So that one has 2 pips, and then eventually 1 pip. So he takes 4 hits to get destroyed, is the bottom line. And the way you do that is you're going to have to replace this one with one that's in here. So that's what that's all about. So let's keep looking at this. The other information that are on these is, you'll see there on the left, it's the 352nd, I think it's brigade or division. And then on the right, it's the 85th Corps. Okay, so it's all in Roman numerals. And then at the bottom, you're going to see a 5, which represents its strength. And then the 3 on the right represents its movement points. And then this little O2 that you see at the bottom, it's an activation order. So when you're dealing with, especially the AI, things will activate in the order of those numbers. Otherwise, it doesn't impact anything with combat. The pink color at the top, it's sort of helpful because you're going to get these command cards that'll match that color. And then this blue color here you see is representing the army that it's from. And let me show you real quick. On the edge of the board, you can see here there's a German 7th Army. It's sort of hard to read, but and then you see this little blue bar that starts here and goes all the way down to the bottom. And then you see there's this grayer bar that starts here and it goes up. And maybe a little hard to read, but it'll say German 5th Panzer Army. And then way up there, you'll see the German 6th Panzer Army. And the color of those bands matches the color that you see here. Okay? And then the last piece of information is this 2106. That is the starting hex. And so you can see here, let me get this focused for you. See how that says 2102, 2103, 4, 5, and then 6. So that's where this guy is starting the game, is in 2106. So you can see I have a whole bunch of units already on the board, and that is because I went through and put them in the hex that they belong in. Okay? So the next thing that I did is I set a few aside that I didn't actually put on the board yet. I wanted to show you these ones. This one has a 17 here. And so you'll notice that that's not a hex number. That's because these guys don't start the game on the board. They start the game off the board on December 17th. This game goes from December 16th through the 29th. And so what they're trying to tell you is you take these and you put them on December 17th, and you can see I did that with other units. Now this is a German unit, and I like to keep them in separate piles. So when you see 2 piles here, you can see these are the Allied reinforcements and these are the German ones. You don't have to do that, it's just something I do. Now, another thing I want to show you is this one is 17S. See how it has S there? I think the S stands for strategic. What it stands for is not as important. What it means is that when the reserves deploy, these guys are going to deploy first. That's what the S means. So they're like the priority ones. So if some of these are going to deploy, but not all of them, the S's always come out first. And then I have here some of the 16s. And this one is the German on the 16th. Now the 16th one is a little silly because one of the first things we're going to do when we start the game is they're going to start in the reserve. But that is how it works. Okay, so there are two exceptions you need to be very careful about. It's in the rule book, and I think they're labeled this way because of other scenarios. We're going to do the Battle of the Bulge, which is basically the full scenario. There's other ones that are different, and they have different setups. And anyways, this particular unit here, see, it has 1307, but see how it has that little asterisk next to it? This would start on hex 1307, you would think, but in this particular scenario, it does not. In fact, you have to put it on the reserve unit. It's waiting to be deployed, but it's not yet in the map, okay? That's extremely important. It's called out in the rules. Make sure you get that pulled off. Now, another weird one is this one right here. It has a 16 on it, which makes you think that it belongs on the December 16th date, but that's not true at all. Now, this is the German solo booklet from BGG. I do use it. It's pretty nice. It's especially nice for things like setup, and it tells you right here that it actually goes on 0608, and that is also called out in the rulebook, by the way. You don't need the solo guide to have it tell you that. So then you got to find 06, 02, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 06, 08, so it's going to start the game right there. Now, one of my observations with this particular map, it's really funny because we all seem to start, when I say we all, I mean just about everybody starts on the German solo first. It's because the rules recommend it. I guess this is simpler than the Allied one, which makes me laugh because I think this one can be pretty complex at times. Excuse me. I had to yawn. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm even boring myself. One of the things about this map that the other maps don't have is, let me zoom in for you here. See how you can read 2009 and then 2010? It's not so bad, except there's times like this. See here where the triangle is covering up the 1812? And then see how that triangle is covering up to 1811? There's a fat triangle and there's a skinny triangle. Well, there's times when the fat triangle is covering up the hex. Here's a... where am I? Oh, there you go. There's an example. So there's a skinny one. There's the fat one, right? Covering up the hex. I can't even read that hex. And then I can't read this one either, nor can I read that one. I can see here that this one says 1412, so I can determine that. So this must be 13. And how do I know that? Because this is 16. So 15, 14, 13. And this is 12. So I see a 2 here, so I know that's 12. So that must be 14, 13. You see how much deduction I had to do just to figure out what the heck that number was? That is a huge issue with this particular map. If I take you over to the Allied map and tell you, hey, let's find 1412, look at that, perfect. See how there's no triangles? These are all very perfect, easy to read hexes. So this map is just far superior from that perspective. Now there's a reason for the triangles and they're necessary, so please don't take it the wrong way. I just think that there was an opportunity here to get these hexes numbered a little better. I don't understand why maybe the numbers couldn't just be in the center. But then again, you have stuff like this in the center. So I think either way there's an issue. I'm not trying to say I have all the solution to world hunger here, but just a warning to you guys that that is just something you're gonna have to overcome. Now, as the game starts playing, I no longer care about hex numbers. It's just set up that it becomes a big issue. Sometimes when people are giving me feedback, they'll say, hey, you were supposed to do this on hex 1512. I have no clue where hex 1512 is, and I'm so impressed that these folks know it better than I do. But anyways, that's something you just have to overcome, and you know, you just use your deduction, be patient. You'll be able to figure out every single location on the map. It's just, they're not all gonna look, those triangles are really gonna interfere. And then sometimes the forest will too. So then you have the forest and the triangle. I mean, it can get crazy. Okay, so enough of that. As far as the rest of setup goes, we have some blown bridges, and those are laid out in the rules, but that's where you put these little markers, and they point, and sure enough, there's a bridge here. But what this is saying is that the bridge is blown up. So that's going to impact the ability to fight across the bridge and cross it whenever they do movement and things of that nature. Okay, so next is this guy. There are 6 of these. See how it has the hex number 1708, but then it's underlined. So what that means is they actually start the game with an improvement marker, which is, I don't know, like think of it as just trenches or whatever. They've improved their position. So you just put them together like this, and so, and then we just put it on 1708 at the start of the game with that. And so, for example, this is 1608. So this must be 1508. See, and then look at this one. I can't even see that that says 1708, but I know it's 1708 because that's 16 and that's 18. So we know that that one must be 17. And sorry, I wasn't even zoomed in for you here. So there you go. Let me zoom in for you. You tell me if you can tell that that's 1708. See that big triangle just covers the whole thing up. You can see the 8, and then it's just a matter of deduction. See, 1808 here, and then 1608 there. So clearly, this has to be. So that's how that works. Now, this is an interesting situation here, because, well, no, it's not. I bumped it. So that bridge is destroyed. Okay. Okay, so next, the fuel markers. There are 5 of them. Like I said, just shuffle them up, and then you're gonna see spots on the board that have these little fuel icons, and you just put them on the 5 spots. I don't remember where they all are. There's one there, one there, and why am I not? Oh, the last one right there. Okay, those fuel markers are opportunities for us to potentially steal fuel from the Allies. 2 of them say no, the other 3 say yes. The no's are basically they're duds, and the 3 yeses are we found fuel and was able to take some, and then of course that will help us later in the game. The combat chits. That's these things. The game comes with 2 of them, 2 sets of combat chits. They are very similar color. You have to actually put them side by side to see that they are different colored. Please do not make the mistake of mixing them together. They gave you an extra set because apparently these wear out. And so that extra set just needs to be set aside out of the game. You only use 1 set for your game. So be very, very careful there. And I think I did on my first playthrough. I complained about it quite a lot. So I'm going to try not to complain about it twice in a row. Okay, now there are going to be some player aids. The terrain effects is used in all games, and you can see that on the top left corner. They have like a little key to tell you. So we're going to be using that. And then we have 2, and see, again, on the top left is the key. It says German Solo. So you're going to have a German events and tactics and a key rule summary. And the back side will say, they might say something different, but you can see that the key is on both sides of the player aid. So those are the 2 player aids you need, along with the terrain effect chart. That's all you use. There's player aids for allied solo, there's player aids for other stuff. You're not going to use those. There is a deck of cards that say German setup on them. Those you do not use. So you can set those out of the game. And there is a German command card display that you use. And up on the top left, that'll say German solo as well. It's also used in a 2-player game. Okay, so let's talk about the cards now. Let's do the allies first. This particular allied deck is called the Allied Action deck, and there's going to be a bunch of cards in them, and you're going to take 10 cards out of this deck. Which 10 cards, you ask? They all say Allied Offensive Action at the top. So there's 10 of them, and you'll take those out, and they don't start in the game. And then make sure you shuffle the ones that you take out. These Allied Offensive Action cards need to be shuffled because what you're going to do is you're going to randomly put some back into the deck every turn once we hit the trigger that causes this to happen. And I think that trigger is turn 19 or December 19th. Okay, then the Allied Command deck is going to be, created and shuffled, and there's a whole bunch of Allied commands that are not going to start in the game. How do you know which one's which? This one's a little bit easier. On the top right here, you're going to see numbers, and the 16 means that they're active on December 16th, which is the start of the game. So you take all of the 16s and you put them together, and then you just give it a nice shuffle. The other ones, of course, are going to have numbers that are higher than 16, and I do recommend that you sort them. So right now you can see the 17s are on top and then the 20s, because that's the day that they're going to enter the game. So just makes it easier to go through the deck if they're sorted. Okay, there's a unit here called the Vonderheit, and it has a VDH. This unit is a paratrooper unit that sort of creates problems, and then you can rescue him later, and then you get a victory point for it. It's a pretty interesting thing. Just set it here. It's used once in the game, and if you can rescue him, and like I said, you get a point. Like I said, it's a once per game thing. Then there's a whole bunch of units here called OKW Reserve. I can't remember what the OKW stands for. Don't be mad at me. It doesn't matter. And they all have the OKW on the right. Top right there, see how it says OKW? These do not come into the game until you cross the Meuse River, which I played my entire campaign yesterday, or my first campaign of this, and never even got close to crossing the Meuse River. But that would explain why I lost. Let's not do that this playthrough, okay? The Meuse River, by the way, it starts there in Liege. See, it comes out from the north of the map, and then it goes over, I don't even want to try to pronounce that, Huey, and then it goes until you get to Namur, and then it goes south past Dinant, and then keeps going past Givet, and through my white tray, and then off the southern edge of the map. So that's the Meuse River, and if we cross that, we score 10 victory points. In fact, you can see that there, the first supplied German unit to cross the Meuse gets 10 victory points. And we get all these units to join us, which is not a chump change thing. I mean, I'm looking at those units. Those are pretty sweet units. So, anyways, that's just something, one of our objectives in the game, if you will. Now, one thing I did notice, we're supposed to start at 0 victory points, as you can see, how it says 0. And you can see there on turn 18 or higher, if the west wall position is held by the Allies, we're going to lose 5 victory points. So there are some spots, the west wall, by the way, are the spots that have these little speckles on them. That's the west wall. It's my understanding that this represents the Maginot Line, except on the German side. that was used during World War I. So this is a series of forts held by the Germans. And you can see that the Allies are actually in a few of them. I think that one right there is. Let me see. Yep, that's a west wall. Oh, sorry, that's a west wall right there. And so this unit is on top of the west wall. So we actually have several spots here, if we cleared them out of the way, where the Allies are already on the west wall. And so if we don't get them off by December 18th, we're going to start losing points. Okay, so that's another immediate objective. I don't think it's going to be too hard to get them off the west wall, to be honest with you, but I've done crazier things. Now, on the German side, it's very similar, except you have two types of cards. You have primary cards that say primary on the bottom, and they will have the 16, so you know which ones start on December 16th. So you're going to shuffle those and put them on the draw pile here. And then the other ones are supplemental cards. They don't have the primary banner on the bottom. And once again, it's all going to be just 16. And there's a really nice chart here for the other ones and when they come in the game. But you can see here that I have the German ones sorted out. And then the ones that say OR, that doesn't have a specific date, that's for the OKW units that come into the game later. So when they come in the game, because we cross the Meuse, then we add those OR cards to the game. Okay? So that's 30 minutes of setup. And for some of you who watched my first playthrough, I apologize if that was too much. But if there's any questions regarding setup, please let me know. I think that covers everything. And I'm going to go ahead and jump in and let's do at least part of the first turn, which is December 16th. And I will try to explain rules as I go. It's always a good exercise for me to do that anyways. And yeah, let's get cracking. Okay, so the first thing is there's a little turn marker there. It looks like a little calendar. And so obviously we put that on December 16th to show that that's the turn that we're on. And there's a whole bunch of text written on it. It's really hard to see because, as you can see, we have all of those reinforcement chits over there. And so if you take the rule book and you flip, the last page of the rule book over, you're going to see everything that's written on the calendar. So you don't have to move all that stuff out of the way. So here's the things that you need to pay attention to every day. And I'm saying this because I never paid attention to it in the beginning. So please learn from my mistakes. Okay, so the first thing is it's saying that the available supplemental cards that added to the German draw pile are 9. I know that means nothing to you, but it means a whole lot, and I'll explain why in a second. Then the initial German hand is plus 3 cards. Normally our hand size is always 6 cards the whole game. But for the very first turn, December 16th, it's going to be 3 more. Now, here's the thing with this game. The rules are quite intense at times, right? They make sense once you get it, but they don't make sense until you get it. But December 16th has so many rule-breaking rules, like where you treat it differently, you don't do this, you do that, that when you move to December 17th, it's a completely different game, or it feels that way. And your hand size is 6, but on December 16th, it's actually 9 to start. So there's so much insanity that you're going to have because what you thought was normal was actually just a special rule. But anyways, that's the thing. You get plus 3 cards. Then the Allied command level during the first turn, which is the first impulse, is 10. And then for the rest of the day, it's 5. So that's another wonky thing, is that you have special rules just for the first impulse. I haven't even explained what the first impulse is, but we take a turn, then they take a turn. We take a turn, and then they take a turn. And we keep doing this until we pass or we run out of cards, okay? So when that happens, then they get to take their turn, and then the day is over. And every time we take a turn, it's called a German impulse, or they take a turn, it's an Allied impulse. So that's where the impulse word comes in. And when we take a turn, we play cards, right? That's what these cards are over here. And when we play our cards, if we play a card that has a command value, like you add up the command value of all the cards you play, and if they ever get to 10 or more, then that's the trigger that our impulse ended, and now it's their turn. So then after they take their turn, it's our turn again, and then we're going to have a command level of 5 for the rest of the day. So then we can play cards until we get over 5, and then we have to stop, and then it's their turn, okay? So you could play, if each card is only worth 1 on its value, you could play potentially 5 cards, or 10 up here. But anyways, we'll get into that. Let me show you an example. I'm just going to grab one that's not in the game yet. This is a card that will enter the game on December 19th. And see that little 1 there? That's the command value. So if I were to play this card, that's 1 out of the 10 points that we would need to spend on our first impulse. And there's a lot of stuff here that's for the AI, if the AI were to use this card. And then, actually, it's for us too, because see where it says G? We only use the actions that say G on them, or the actions that have this little triangle. Okay, so anything that says an A, that's for the Allied solo game, so we ignore those. And so yes, this is saying that I would activate the 1st SS Panzer Corps, which is a part of the 6th Panzer Army. Remember we talked about the armies over there? Well, we know the 6th Panzer Army is the one way up at the top, so this 1st SS Panzer Corps is probably up there somewhere. Okay, and so we can get into all the text that's on here later, but that's the idea, is that when I play this card, see that little 1 there, that counts towards the 10 points needed to end the impulse. And there's more rules around it, but I'm not going to go into it until we actually start. So yeah, the calendar has all this information here. The key things that you're going to see every day is how many supplemental cards do you get to draw. This is special rule. And then what's the Allied command level? Because that does change, because you can see here the Allied command level is just a 3 on December 19th. Now, the fixed artillery range is called FAR for short. That's the reason why you see FAR down here, fixed artillery range. What that is that's the, there's artillery on the west wall, everywhere. Just anywhere there's a west wall, there's artillery. And so you can, if they're going to help you with a battle, if it's a value of 3, that means they can only shoot out 3 spaces. So you can pick any west wall hex and count out 3 spaces, and that's where the artillery can hit. If you need them to go 4 spaces, too bad, too sad. Okay, so it does change, because you can see that here it's 6 spaces. So the artillery does get longer range eventually, but not at the beginning of the game. And then in red text, this is a really cool feature of the game. They remind you of what special rules are in effect for this day only, whereas in other times, like here it says start, you can do delayed reserves. Like there's things you can do on December 18th. These are new rules that now exist for the game that didn't exist prior. Okay, these are rules that exist only on this day. So there's a lot of stuff you got to keep track of, and yeah, you can get the hang of the game, and then all of a sudden you got all these new rules you have to deal with. So that's another thing to bear in mind. So the back of the rule book has a nice daily sequence of play, and it is nice to go through. Anytime you see these little like this 22 plus, that means that you don't do this until December 22nd. So you can skip that until you get to that date. So for example, the supply phase, you can see the entire supply phase isn't done until December 17th. We're on December 16th, so we're going to skip this entire phase for our first day. And so that's the kind of stuff you need to be mindful of. Now this will do the same thing. It'll take you through. It even shows what the December 16th special rules are, which are really cool. And it takes you through the flow of the game, more of a step-by-step. Because like right here, you can see the reserve phase and then the card prep phase. Well, if you go to this, you'll see that's the reserve phase and there's a card prep phase. So it does take you through the same set of rules. It tends to flesh it out a little bit more. So I do appreciate this because it's very helpful. But once you start to understand this, this is maybe a little more helpful only when you know the rules, right? Just because this is quicker to go through than flipping through all these pages. But this still has all the detail that this does not. Now, one final thing. I know there's so much going on and we haven't even started our turn. The player aids, when do you use them and when don't you? Well, let's start with this one. The card and unit reference, which is on the back of the terrain effects. This is just for when you're learning the game, it tells you what every single thing is on the card. So you'd be like, what's that little 46 mean? Oh, that's just a card ID number. Ignore it. Oh, what's that number 1 on the top left mean? Oh, that's the command value. You better learn that, sucker. And so that's the thing. And even like the allied action cards, it gives you the breakdown of what everything is. And it even tells you here that if you're playing the GS game, which is the German solo game, you only do the triangle or the G actions. Same with the allied player. Okay, so that's the idea. Now, the terrain hex or chart is very helpful because it gives you movement costs. But just a reminder, the movement costs are here as well, which this is actually a more efficient one. But the thing you're going to use this for is when there's a combat effect. You need to know how combat is affected by the terrain. And yes, I'm going to confess, man, oh man, did I forget this one a million times in my first couple videos. And then over here, there's other effects, like, for example, defender hits reduced by 1, blah, blah, blah. And we'll get into those as we go. Strategic movement is something I never used my entire last game, but that's because this is more meant for if you're way behind the enemy lines, or way behind your own line, and you're trying to get caught up to the front. This is a way to get extra movement points. But it's very restrictive. I mean, you can't just do that while you're fighting the allies. You have to be very far away. You have to have, everything has to be free and clear. It's, all the rules are here. But the stacking limit is 3 units or 6 steps, whichever applies. And here's what's funny. I didn't realize it was 3 units. I think I've stacked 4 units many times in my last game. And I'm just now realizing that there's a 3-unit stack limit. So, go figure. Here I am trying to teach you, and I'm admitting that I didn't even know something as basic as that. So we talked about the steps. So you can have any combination of units up to 6 steps, but no more than 3 units, I guess. That's a very interesting thing. What's happened is most units are 2 steps. And having 3 of them to make 6 steps, it makes sense. That's what we do. But sometimes when the units start taking damage, they go down to 1 step each. And I think I've stacked 4 or 5 of them, in my previous game, without realizing I can only ever do 3 units. So, yeah, I'm glad I'm going through this with you. I learned something today. There's bracketed units. So when a unit takes damage, here you can see he has 3 strength, and then if he takes damage, see how that 2 is in brackets? Well, once they're in brackets, they're still a unit. That 2 is still the amount of strength that applies in combat. But then there's extra rules that kick in, and we can go over that. And then these dispersed units have rules too. And I even hand wrote one that John Butterfield put on Board Game Geek, and it wasn't actually in the rules anywhere. So I wrote it down because it's very critically important for when you're doing dispersed unit checks. I don't mean to go through every player aid like this. This one, here's my best summary of it. This page, this side is for German event and tactics. We're going to use this heavily, okay? The flip side is allied event and tactics. So this is when the allies are taking their turn. You're going to need it. And then the middle of it is if you're ever doing combat, this is the procedure for how to resolve combat, how to advance after combat, how to apply damage, all that stuff. And then some keywords. This is your Bible for events, combat, and then allied events, okay? And then this last one is, it's sort of a hodgepodge, but it's got key rule summaries, which is awesome. Effects of various levels of unsupply, also awesome. Definition of fuel shortages, how to do reserve deployment, everything there. Now, the front side is step-by-step on how to do allied commands when we're managing their AI. And then the middle is some more checks that we have to do for managing the AI. And then this is for deploying AI units. So yes, it has quite the hefty multi-tiered decision tree. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and then I will hit start in a few seconds. And let's actually just get playing, and I'll explain it as I go. I think 45 minutes of introducing you to the game is more than enough, especially for those of you who already watched my other playthrough. So let's go ahead and get going.